I never thought I'd see the day where an Obsidian game would release to such ambivalence and copium, for lack of a better word. This game went live on early access to everyone who was willing to shell out like $90 for a deluxe version of the game that gave them 5 days of play in advance from peasants like myself. Around these 5 days, the concurrent player numbers on Steam was around 10 to 13,000 people, give or take. Naturally, I expected this number would explode once the actual release of February 18 came along, and that this weekend it would shoot up even further, as is the usual case. But sadly this didn't happen at all. In fact, you can barely notice the difference. The concurrent players only went up to around 17,000 on its actual launch, and as of the recording of this video, it seems that the peak number for its opening weekend is going to be around 18,000. This feels really off, even for a game that is launching on Game Pass. Obviously, that's always going to nick a few sales as people decide to either test it out first to see if they like it, or straight up decide to play the whole game with just 1 month's worth of the subscription. But that's not really a good excuse either way, as there's been plenty of other games launching on Game Pass that still made good sales and got really good concurrent player numbers on Steam even recently, such as with Stalker 2, and even great player numbers, such as with Starfield. But somehow we still have a bunch of people and games media coping endlessly, saying that the game is amazing and a fantastic success and the player numbers are actually great and there's way more people playing the game via Game Pass. And that's not to mention the anger being shown at people doing comparisons to other video games that are relevant, which we'll go into in a separate video. On this video though, we're going to be talking about the general situation so far, plus my impressions of the game as I continue on playing it for a full, more complete video later on. So let's just jump in. Some people are really keen on ignoring the elephant in the room that a massive Xbox release just tanked in terms of sales and live players. This is yet another thing that is getting dangerous levels of copium injected into it via games media and other gaming channels by touting the fact that Avowed made it into Steam's top seller list as some kind of huge thing when it's actually so irrelevant. Seriously, think about how inconsistent it is. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 reached the top of that list as well and had over 200,000 players, so if you're just a layman, you would think that Avowed is now outselling Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 since both of these games came out just now, both of them in the past couple of weeks, without knowing that this list is refreshed like every 24 hours. Hell, even Civilization 7 managed to hit the top of this list, and that game is a certified meme, it's not even a secret. There's nothing wrong with, as a studio or especially as an indie developer, being glad that your game has hit the top of a seller's list on Steam, but anything can manage this when it comes to this particular list, which should be renamed to something like Steam's Daily Seller List. When you celebrate this without due context, it's like you're saying that your game just surpassed a previous top seller from just a few days ago, such as Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, when in reality it just means that on this particular day, your game managed to sell a few extra copies than the others, which just makes it a normal occurrence for any new big release. At the end of the day, concurrent player numbers are good indicators of success because they're indicators of sales, because generally speaking, if someone buys a brand new game, they're going to be playing it. I can accept that there could be a few extra thousand players on Game Pass playing as we speak, just like myself, but the low sales and the low adherence to this game is still a fact, and definitely not something that Xbox or the team are happy to see, no matter what levels of copium they go on about, such as the director saying that everyone is really happy and proud and that the sales numbers are good. This is just starting to look like Veilguard Round 2, where everyone is really happy just after launch, everyone is super excited, the game's media are having a blast with it, the communities are really satisfied, everyone's just saying that everyone else is just a chud or a loser or whatever, and then a couple months later, things ended up where they ended up. This Dissonance is another example of a thing I spoke about recently in my Veilguard Aftermath video, where there's such a thick cloud of toxic positivity surrounding the industry, people just can't admit flaws or issues or worries with anything, and then this attitude just helps maintain these flaws and issues going forward. Not addressing addressing the fact that Avowed, a brand new big release from Obsidian, a well-regarded RPG studio now working with big funding from Xbox, is doing terrible numbers and being paraded as a regression from other games within the same genre, or at the very least other games that Obsidian themselves have worked on, like Outer Worlds, is a really bad thing. Hiding from reality isn't going to make the game better or help sell it more, and it's also not going to make Obsidian get better and fix what they need to fix in the future. And trust me, I understand that you may be enjoying this game. Like, the game isn't terrible, and so I know that there's some people enjoying it and looking at what's going on online and getting upset as if there's this weird attack being launched on Avowed specifically in bad faith or whatever. Like, I totally understand this aspect of the situation as well, even though I do believe that a big part that is feeding into it is the way that everyone is just pretending like this game is the best piece of cheese on the planet. Like, this level of, this astronomical copium that is surrounding this game is just making people go even harder in their criticism and, you know, in drawing comparisons. Like, people were drawing comparisons to Skyrim. There was a lot of copium still surrounding the game. Avowed is peak, bro. Avowed is peak. And so people went and pulled out Oblivion and started comparing it to Oblivion, like, hey, if a 14-year-old game wasn't bad enough, check this out. But regardless of that, you know, taking that aside, I do understand being someone who is just really genuinely enjoying whatever the game has to offer and seeing these attacks coming in and not understanding them. But here's the thing, and I'm going to speak for myself here, but there may be some people who might agree with me on this. Let me know in the comments if you do. When I saw Microsoft buy out Obsidian back when they were going nuts with all of these acquisitions, at first I was upset. I thought it was like a cheap move. Basically, they failed to foster their own exclusive lineup, so they were taking third-party studios and making them their own. Then I saw other companies also fishing around, either making acquisitions of their own such as Embracer Group, or just sniffing around the games industry such as Google, Facebook, Amazon and Apple. So I just thought to myself, you know what, better that Microsoft acquires them and has them work on future Xbox exclusives than any other of these companies, these tech companies and social media companies, since at least Xbox is a household name. At least Xbox knows the industry, whereas a company like Amazon or Facebook or Google, for example, has no stake in it and would likely just want to be making a quick buck, having absolutely no idea how game development works. And then, after that part of my quote-unquote grief stage was done, I started to even see other positives in it because of how much money they had and how, at the time, Xbox seemed to be in a really good headspace, adding value to their platform and to their customers. One of the great things that they did that legitimately made me want to go and buy an Xbox was doing backwards compatibility to 360 and Xbox original games. This is something that Sony swore off of completely. In fact, if you recall, we almost didn't even have backwards compatibility to the PS4 with the PS5. If you recall, they were going to do 100 games at launch and then they were going to just fucking feed us slop. Every now and then they would release another backwards compatible game. This caused a huge uproar, and then just a couple months later after that they announced that the PS5 was fully backwards compatible with the PS4 with like 4,000 games fully available to play immediately, and only like a handful or two of games had issues and wouldn't be playable. So just in the space of a couple of months, they went from, shit, we can't do it, folks, we can only do 100, we can only do 100 at first, and then we'll do a few more, you know, every now and then we'll do another one and another one, okay fellas, to we got them all, folks. We got them all. 4,000 games ready to go. We got them all, folks. We improved the technology. We made it better, and we got them all. Which I thought was really shady. I really didn't like that at all. Game preservation is not just important, it's vital. I mean, come on. Even if every new release was amazing, which it is not, I would still want to have access to my favorite games of older generations to enjoy again. Games like Mafia 2, Red Dead Redemption, L.A. Noire, Deus Ex, Human Revolution, Witcher 2, Oblivion, etc., Fallout, New Vegas, Mass Effect Trilogy, Ninja Gaiden, etc. The list goes on, and obviously some of these did get remasters or re-releases in the meantime, but many did not. So in short, in my mind, at the turn of the generation, PlayStation was taking L's and Xbox was pulling W's, at least when it came to pro-consumer tactics. And as someone who had a PS4 and didn't even bother to buy an Xbox One at all, I actually saw the value of getting an Xbox in this current generation instead of just getting a PS5. So in short, my dumb little head kept thinking along the lines of, wow, you know, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe this is actually a good thing. With the help of additional funding and resources from Xbox, such a rich company who seems focused on delivering quality and value to us, these studios will now be able to go further and improve the quality of their games. Now you may be listening to that and going,
You serious?
but this was always the idea. While it may have been naive of me to think so, it is definitely not an unrealistic concept. Like, in concept, this is how these acquisitions should have been handled. You take talented studios who do good work, and then you grow them and you invest into them, and they now go out and make even better games than they were making before. Hell, with some of the pro player sentiment at the time, I even thought that maybe, just maybe, there would have been a chance of a new Vegas 2 or whatever else a new Fallout Obsidian game would be called, since Microsoft now owned both Fallout, Bethesda, and Obsidian. But now, I don't even want Obsidian to fucking touch the franchise. Honestly, guys, I'm gonna be honest with you guys right now, no matter how much hate I get sent my way for this comment. As it stands right now, and as damaged as the prospect of a future Fallout is, no matter who develops it, during this terrible climate for Western AAA games, I would rather have Bethesda handle a new Fallout New Vegas than have Obsidian go anywhere near it, since it seems like they've just truly embraced this new vibe of doing cartoony, depthless games that don't really aspire to be more than lower budget semi-RPGs. And that's not to say that Bethesda understands Fallout, because they don't. And Starfield proves that they don't even understand themselves and their own identity, what made their previous RPGs fun to play. It's simply to say that, at least with Bethesda, I know that I don't have to expect something cartoony and with a dead world that doesn't react to my character. Back with the Outer Worlds, it was something I just accepted. I was like, you know what, okay, they're doing a different thing. They're not going too serious with the setting, they're taking a more lighthearted and comedic approach to their universe and to this game in general. It's fine, it's witty, there's some funny jokes, you can play the whole game as a dumb character with negative points invested into intelligence, with hilarious dialogue exchanges, there's guns that shrink people because of weird science and whatnot, you can still interact with the world around you, you got different factions to side with, you can even choose to be a total evil maniac or a hero. You know what, I'm fine with this, let's go. And also aside from that, it was also a lower budget RPG published by Private Division. But with Avowed now, it seems like it's just what they do now. Cartoony, soft visuals, lots of strong colors, quirky looking characters, no grit, no seriousness, which is something that I don't even understand, because if you guys watch the first trailer, it's just night and day from what we got from the actual game that is presented to us. I don't know if things change during development or what, but you know what, fuck it, let's just play the video right now.
We have always known war. It forged our empire, turned heroes into queens and kings, and decimated our foes. Now our oaths are lost, forsaken. And you must face the monsters our sins have borne. Is an oath worth the weight of a crown?
Like, this looks and sounds very different from what we got. This set a whole different vibe for the game. But anyway, this is something that I can even discount so long as things, are more consistent. But worse than that is, there's a lack of player agency and interaction with the world. And this shows a regression, not a progression nor a different style choice. If you're making an RPG, you're making an RPG. And this is the thing that bothers me the most about it all. It's that Microsoft takes this studio in, the assumption would be for it to become better and have more funds to make even better games, to evolve the elements that make up their core DNA as Obsidian and maybe even welcome new ones, but instead we're just going backwards. And I just can't get away from that disappointment. As much as I may wish to, kinda just take Avowed for what it is, I just can't get away from the fact that it should be so much better than this. Like, there are elements that are missing. Obsidian shouldn't be a studio where you kind of just frown and go, well, whatever, it's fine for what it is. It should be a studio that makes me forget about every other game I got and sucks me into its world for a good few dozen hours. Especially with the added fact that it's now backed by big money, by arguably what is becoming the biggest publisher in the industry. If this is all that they can do with all that money, what was even the point of being acquired? Why are these studios being taken in, just to mass produce average games to litter their Game Pass? Because this is a damn sad fate for all of the studios with big potential that they acquired if this is the case. If the case is to just produce the same stuff and maybe even regress it a little bit instead of growing them, evolving them, and providing better games that can even compete with Sony's first-party games. Whatever, guys, it is what it is, I guess. Let's talk about expectations. People can take this game for what it is. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with doing that, but they can't be surprised at all of the negative comments surrounding this game, or the videos making fun of it by comparing it to similar games that are over a decade older, and still somehow manage to have more features and more detail. Sometimes a game comes along and it fails, and then people from the studio go out and talk major shit about why those games failed in some weird cope festival kind of way. For example, last year, Yves Guillemot from Ubisoft went on and on about how gamers have extraordinary expectations, as if these are unrealistic expectations cooked up by ourselves, expectations that are impossible to be met, and so inevitably these games fail, and it's totally not their fault as the studios, because they did all that they could. They pulled a banger out of a hat, and it's just that we are expecting crap that goes beyond the realm of possibility. He said this in regards to Star Wars Outlaws, by the way, a game that, if you recall, released caked with bugs and with lackluster features. The action was lacking because it didn't have any basic features that a third-person shooter should have. Like, being able to hold your fucking weapon when you move around and climb stuff. And the stealth was lacking because it didn't have basic stealth features like, AI that fucking works and doesn't make itself go blind as soon as you walk into tall grass. Also, additional stealth mechanics instead of just crouching. The game was just a joke. It still kind of is, but at launch it was even worse. People weren't really expecting the world out of it, but it still failed those basic expectations. And whenever people are discussing Avowed online and how it's a damn embarrassment that NPCs and these entire cities are literally just set dressing, they can't be interacted with, they can't be attacked, they can't be stolen from, they can't even walk, they can't even interact with one another, they can't even fucking function in any way at all that gives them presence. Bring a bandit into town and they just stand there like nothing's happening. My god, this is worse than Ubisoft's NPCs. At least those react. They got these little cowering animations and a few stock scream.mp3 sounds for them to play whenever a player is blasting a gun in public, or swinging a sword around in a town, or if someone explodes, or if there's fire, or if there's a bandit picking a fight with guards. But Avowed has none of this. It's all just a big fake cardboard set. And when people talk about it, they channel Yves Guillemot and that idiotic statement. They're so biased towards this game, so hyperfixated on painting it as a massive success, that they don't even care to engage with valid criticism like that. And it really is valid, because this is supposed to be an RPG. Not every RPG has to have crazy levels of interaction and immersion, but they definitely should have the bare minimum to have players get sucked into their worlds and feel like they have a presence within it, a minimum level of impact within the world. And I don't understand why why they don't take this kind of criticism seriously. I understand not wanting to talk about other things, like for example, there's a video going around comparing a bear fight from Avowed versus a bear fight from God of War Ragnarok. And yeah, of course, in cases like these, it's absolutely retarded. You're not going to compare a fight in an action game to a fight in an RPG. It's fucking stupid, obviously. You could even do the same thing in reverse. You could grab two NPCs talking in God of War, and then you could grab yourself talking in Avowed and showing dialogue options like, wow, bro, I can't believe God of War Ragnarok, a AAA video game from Sony, from Sony no less, doesn't have any dialogue options. I mean, absolutely preposterous. But they are just closing their eyes and ears to any sort of criticism, any valid criticism at all, such as things to do with immersion and interaction in an RPG. This is something that Kingdom Come Deliverance is doing in spades, and it's been my favorite aspect of both the first game and the second one, but especially in the first one, where you were really just a nobody and you can work your way up from nothing in whatever way you want to, and every little system is so rich with detail that it adds weight to what you're doing and presence to the world itself. Every little bit of money I got was cherished, so much so that I went into thievery working for the Millers and their network of charlatans, sort of like the Thieves Guild of the Kingdom Come Deliverance world, and I had a blast with it. The first mission alone, going out to get a ring from a corpse, except you dig up the corpse and the ring isn't there, so then you have to go and steal it from the executioner, and you have so much to worry about in this instance. You have to be sneaky, and being sneaky already hinges in several elements, such as putting on black clothes and not wearing armor that makes too much noise, as noise is absolutely a thing that your character produces and that NPCs react to. Make too much noise and the prick is going to hear you, and if you do this at the start of your adventure, you've got fuck all to defend yourself with, so ideally you want to be sneaky. You also should be minimally good at lockpicking, which entails training it a bit back at the mill, as it has its own minigame. Furthermore, as if that wasn't enough already, the executioner has a dog, and dogs start going nuts barking when they see you, which immediately calls for the attention of any NPCs that reside in the home, so you gotta be extra careful. Or you can, for example, figure out that bringing a sausage with you and dropping it for the dog will help keep the dog distracted, so that's at least one less obstacle. Now, if you compare to how this shit would go down in Avowed, it's laughable. There's really no sneaking at all because there's also no stealing, so if you can't steal anything, you don't really have to sneak. The sneak button is only there for enemies out in the wilds. Forget about dogs or anything like that mattering as well. Hell, you don't even have to lockpick anything. You just need to have lockpicks in your inventory, and then your character will just consume an X amount of lockpicks when you interact with a locked chest. All immersion is sucked out, and then that's also not the only issue. It's also the fact that these little seemingly pointless systems actually allow for quest design variety. A game like Avowed can't really have an exciting little quest where you're tasked by some jackass to go dig up a corpse for a ring, having you trudge around some thick wooded area making your way up to the gallows hill for it, which is actually something that can even pose danger to you if you run into hostile bandits in the way. And then have that quest take a turn to have you go pull a mini robbery at the executioner's house. And that's because all of this relies on elements that tie you into the world, elements that make more out of the world than a simple thing to spectate. When you bastardize the depth of an RPG, you're opening the door for your RPG side quest to just be quick run-of-the-mill slop. Go there and kill this, or go there and steal that. It's uninspired, and so far that's what I've encountered with side quests in the game, which makes me feel fucking sad about it. And you obviously don't need to go as hard as Kingdom Come Deliverance, because Kingdom Come Deliverance goes too far even in these elements, so far that it makes it a more niche game that not everyone can enjoy. A lot of people are just not going to have the patience to put up with so many systems, but you could at least do something like Skyrim, where it's like a middle ground between the two, where these elements exist but they're not pushed that hard. In fact, they are pretty basic. That's why it's such an embarrassing thing when Avowed gets compared to Skyrim. I mean, Skyrim has never been the pinnacle of like impressive RPG mechanics and depth, and yet here we are. But of course, this is just a first impressions thing so far. I only have about 15 hours into this game so far, so fingers crossed that there'll be better quest design ahead at the very least. So besides what I already pointed out in regards to the lack of those elements of immersion and detail, I don't want to give you guys the wrong idea here. While Avowed has been a pretty shallow and surface level experience so far as an Obsidian game and as an RPG, it hasn't been terrible, and it also hasn't been a woke mind virus kind of game. At least not yet. You really never know what Matt Hansen sneaked into the game, after all. So far the combat has been decent, a bit of a mixed bag, but I have hopes that it's going to get better because of the skill trees having a lot of stuff left to be unlocked. Though I am worried about a couple of elements, but I'll leave that for a future video. Another thing that I have liked so far is the verticality in some of the locations that we go to, giving us a lot of climbing and jumping around to do across rooftops, construction sites, etc. You can find some chests high up in some rooftops, towers, and also alternate entrances to some buildings and etc. This is an element I really liked, and it does come with a bit of sadness as well, because again, if you go back to those comparisons that people make to Skyrim and to being able to steal, to being able to, you know, assassinate, just imagine, for example, in Skyrim, going to Solitude to do that quest where we have to assassinate the cousin of the Emperor in her wedding, and being able to run across rooftops and all that shit, preparing yourself on a roof with a bow, preparing your shot, taking it right in the dome, and then getting the fuck out of there through the walls, you know, running across the walls and then jumping out into the wilderness. Like, this is the type of stuff where it would technically be possible in Avowed, because, you know, they have the parkour system and the cities don't even have loading screens. You can just get into the cities and get out of the cities. There's no loading screens, but there's no depth. They don't have the systems to make it possible. Do you see what I mean? Why, in regards to that thing that I said, where if you dumb down your mechanics in the game, you're automatically going to dumb down everything else. Your quest design, your propensity, I think it's propensity, for role-playing, it's all going to get impacted. But anyway, let's move on. While the story has started quite slowly, I have at least been enjoying the lore. I think using the universe of Pillars of Eternity was probably a really good idea to already give them established lore to work with instead of having to create something new. And there's this really handy feature in the game that turns mumbo-jumbo into actually palpable information. Anytime you're in a dialogue, you can bring up a menu that has some keywords in regards to what you're talking about with the NPC, which tells you what a specific term or word or name is referring to the lore. Because naturally the characters are talking to each other in a normal way that assumes that both of the characters know the information that they're talking about already. It's us who are the aliens to this world, so it's us who don't know this information, especially if we haven't played any of the Pillars of Eternity games. So at any time you can just pause the conversation and look up a term or a location or the name of a kingdom or an event in history or whatever that has been referenced in the conversation and read about it to have a little bit of extra information in regards to it. This feature was also present in Final Fantasy XVI, and it was a breath of fresh air. It really helped me get into the lore and history of that world, actually giving me a reason to engage more in optional dialogues with other characters, where I just would not have done it without this feature, because, you know, if it's something that I don't understand, then I prefer to not select any more dialogue options, asking questions and getting answers about shit that I have absolutely no clue what they're saying. It feels like too many 20 pieces of a puzzle being shot at my face and me not being able to pick up any of them. Whereas with this feature, there's a lot of puzzle pieces, but at least I can pause the conversation, look up whatever terms are being used, and I can be like, I understand, this is in relation to that, and this guy is from this land, this word means this, so that's a very big plus. Usually I am more appreciative of this kind of feature in a more immersive kind of way. Once again, I hate to bring up Skyrim, but it is what it is. Skyrim is a game that sucked me into its world and lore and didn't have any of these features to do it. Instead, it had well-placed dialogues and a lot of NPCs to interact with you who can teach you a little of everything. Basically, if you want to know about Talos, for example, go talk to Heimskr. Want to know about Kinnereth? Go talk to Danica. Want to know about Isgramor? Check in with the companions. Want to know about some of the other gods? Check out the other cities. Windhelm has an expert on Talos, Markarth has an expert on Dibella, Solitude has a bit big main temple that houses all of the divines, and of course let's not forget the books. Avowed has books too, but they're dreadfully uninteresting. Skyrim's books were written beautifully, and also the way that you just open them and you can read page by page was just a nice little immersive touch. A lot of them were already copy and pasted books dating back from Morrowind. Their team used to be so fucking good at this. They would present these books with lore and story that was relevant to the player in engaging ways. Like they were quite literally telling a story or a folktale in order to tell the history of the world, rather than presenting an article or whatever. And whenever doing a historical account of something, they often gave the historian who wrote the book a bit of a personality, giving his opinion on the events in writing. You could even find different books with different opinions on the same event. But anyway, this is just a little aside because I really do value this feature regardless. It's definitely something that is better than nothing, which would have just have me lost and annoyed and feeling punished for not having played Pillars of Eternity. I really hope to see this feature present in more RPGs going into the future, even if it's in sequels, because honestly sometimes you may play a game and then the next game, the sequel is taking like 3, 4, 5 years to be completed, and instead of having to replay a game again, it would be nice to just have this feature to kind of give you the context that you're missing. But it should never be used as a replacement for putting immersion into your game. Immersion is so important in these kinds of games. It's such a big plus to see an interactable world, a living, breathing world, one that gives you freedom of choice and consequence and lets you interact with it freely, presenting its NPCs around you as living people with routines and shit instead of just random nameless sprites standing around. The more tied to a world you are, the more you organically want to know about it, the more you want to memorize in regards to its history, its lore, and its mysteries. To close off this point in regards to immersion, and also to close off this video, let me just add this that happened to me yesterday while playing the game. It was one of the saddest things for me so far. I walked into the city of Paradise, which is a city at the beginning of the game, and I get shot with an arrow, and died, sort of. Then you kinda come back to life, whatever, and then my first thought as a player, after having that first dialogue with the nurse or whatever, was to go and find out who the fuck shot me with that arrow. I had a couple of quest objectives, and one of them was to go check out a watcher, which is some kind of a psychic, and the other was to go and have a talk with the ambassador. But in my mind it was like, no, fuck this, I don't want to talk to no psychic, and I don't want to go to the ambassador right away. I want to find out who the fuck shot me. I want to see if I can find a trail. So I go to the place where we get shot, I get there, and there's a bloodstain on the floor. Kai even reacted to it, saying that that's where I fell. So far so good, I thought. From there I looked around at where the arrow could have come from, and there was an obvious tower directly ahead of the entrance. So I went there, climbed up, and I literally find a little sniper's nest sort of thing with a carpet on the floor, some arrows laying around, and even a bottle of poison which the arrow that shot me was coated with. And there was nothing that I could do with any of it. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be able to get back up there for a quest investigating it, but as an RPG that encourages players to be immersed in their story and world, that should have been something that the devs should have expected. In fact, I know that that's the type of shit that old Obsidian would have expected players to do, and would have given us a prompt of some kind to kickstart that investigation right there and then, Lone Ranger style. Instead, it's just more bland, empty set dressing for when the game allows you to follow the script of that investigation. So then I went to the embassy, and then from the embassy I am told to go and check out a dwarf who is supposed to be an expert tracker, and he is amazing and the best one ever, and he's definitely going to find my murderer for me. And his first amazing idea was to go back to the entrance to the scene of the crime, and I didn't even have a dialogue option to say, I already went there, dipshit. Instead I have to play along with this idea that somehow I'm too much of a fucking idiot to know that, oh, I got shot with an arrow, maybe let me go to the entrance to maybe see where the arrow could have come from. No, instead it's the dwarf. The dwarf is amazing, he's the best tracker that Kai has ever known, he is the #1 guy, he's incredible, they even present him as such, as someone who is like 55 steps ahead, and there's just no such thing, dude. His first fucking idea was the same idea that I had, it's just that the fucking programmers didn't program it into the game to allow you as a player to do what you would naturally do in an RPG. And this is something that deeply troubles me when it comes to this game. That is my biggest source of disappointment right now. But anyway, that about finishes this video. I'll be carrying on playing this game likely until completion to give a proper final assessment. I'm still very early in it, so I'm hoping that things are going to get better, especially with the story. While I can be disappointed that it falls short in ways that an Obsidian game shouldn't, and in ways that an RPG honestly shouldn't either, I'm not against praising good aspects in a game if it has them. In other words, while Avowed may be too shallow to be a good RPG, it may yet still have what it takes to be a decent adventure game. I guess we'll see. Until then though, thank you very much for watching this video, leave me a like if you enjoyed it, and take care of yourselves. I'll see you on the next one.